I'm Frenchie.
Ahoy! Yes, I'm Angelo.
Now it's time to get your knowledge activated. Get ready and be attentive. Here are the mechanics. Number 1. There shall be 2 representatives for each group. The 2 representatives will be the ones who write their answer as a group on the board. Number 2. There will be statements stated in which the learners will analyze if it is true or false. Number 3. Each item will only last for 8 seconds and the answer must be already written before it ends. Number 4. The representative will write Czech if it's true and Slovakia if it's false. Game? Czech or Slovakia? Czech is the 4th most difficult language to learn. Number 2. Czech or Slovakia? Czechs invented the words pistol, dollar, and robot. Number 3. Czech or Slovakia? Czechs have the highest consumption of beer than any other country of the world. Number 4. Czech or Slovakia? Czechs are the one who discovered the blood type. Number 5. Czech or Slovakia? They have the lowest production of the old cassette type and black disc. Number 6. Czech or Slovakia? Their currency is called Czech euro. Number 7. Czech or Slovakia? Contact lenses are Czech's innovation. Number 8. Czech or Slovakia? Czech students are Europe's most fashionable ones. Number 9. Czech or Slovakia? Parts of the Narnia movie were filmed in Czech Republic. Number 10. Czech or Slovakia? They are known worldwide for its mouth-blown arts and distinguishing architectures. Done! The answers must be retained until the activity ends and the answers will be revealed afterwards, so listen closely.
Objectives. At the end of the discussion, learners are expected to acquire useful information about the history of the country and its literature, to appreciate the literary works of the author and the country, and to apply the lesson learned through activity and evaluation.
Today, the literature that we are going to explore is written by the renowned writer Franz Kafka. The story is entitled The Metamorphosis, which originates from the country of Czech Republic. But before going to the proper discussion of the story, let us first explore the Czech Republic and its literature. In the year 1918, after World War I, Czechoslovakia was formed. However, in 1993, the country split up into 2 separate nations, the Czech Republic and the Slovakia. The people inhabiting Slovakia are called Slovaks, while the people inhabiting Czech Republic are called Czechs. The official language of Czech Republic is Czech, which is spoken by roughly 10.5 million people. Moreover, the capital city of Czech Republic is Prague. Czech Republic is known for its tourist attractions and a lot more. Well, allow me to present to you 10 facts about Czech Republic. First, Czech is the 2nd most difficult language to learn. True. As regarded by the US Defense Language Institute, this is one of the most complicated language in the world. Czechs can pronounce words containing no vowels at all, and surprisingly, they use them quite often. For example, this word means finger. This means neck. It is also the only language that uses a raised alveolar non-sonorant vowel. And what is that? Well, let Anthony Lauder explain.
I'm going to talk today about pronunciation of this letter. It can be quite scary when you're learning Czech because that letter is, according to some linguists, specific just to the Czech language, and if you've not come across it before, it can be quite foreign and sound quite strange. The actual letter itself is pronounced ersh in the alphabet, ersh, but when you see it in a word, it's pronounced differently. You don't see here ersh eka, Ersh is not Ersh Eka. This means river, by the way. Instead, it's pronounced Řeka. Řeka.
Another typical feature of their language is the use of diacritics written above the letters. The main advocator of the diacritic concept was Master John Hus, who was burned at the stake in Constance for his criticism of the church. His monument dominates Old Town Square in Prague. Moreover, since Czech is a Slavic-based tongue, they mutually are intelligible with each other. Number 2. Czechs invented the words pistol, dollar, and robot. Although it is not a very common language, the whole world uses one word, which is robot, which is first used in the novel R.U.R. by Karel Čapek, which was created by her brother Joseph Čapek. Number 3. Czechs have the highest consumption of beer than any other country of the world. The first known brewery existed in 993. Pilsners were originated here. Of course, there are several beer festivals hosted annually. By the way, Pilsen is Czech's #1 and most popular beer. Exaggeratingly, you can buy beer in McDonald's. Number 4. Czechs are the one who discovered the blood type. Number 5. They have the highest production of this, where you can listen your music to instead of this, smartphones and Androids. They like old school. Number 6. Their currency is called Czech crowns. Although they are in Europe, they do not use euros, but instead Czech crowns. 1 euro is equivalent to 27 Czech crowns, which is in the Philippines, peso conversion, it's 2.34 pesos. Number 7. Contact lenses are Czech's innovation. Number 8. Czech cards are Europe's most fashionable ones. The first Czech president wanted to differentiate his guards' uniforms from the generic ones found in neighboring countries. To do so, he hired a Czech fashion designer called Theodor Stek, and well, the result was a truly amazing one. Number 9. Parts of the freaking Narnia movie were filmed in Czech Republic. Specifically in Pravdikovar or whatever. Just this word. Number 10. They are known worldwide for its mouth-blown arts and distinguishing architecture. Ready? Czech Republic looks like this. So much for the eye-catching views. I'm sure you are also excited to know their rich literature. Alright, besides from the beautiful, beautiful face of Czech Republic, like any other country, Czechs have also a long history of complex kingdom, empires, reformations, alliances, battles, unions, revolutions, splits, and many other forms of oppression. Perhaps, this also became the inspiration of the many Czech writers. Starting with 9th century, the first texts were written in artificially created Old Church Slavonic language, which the missionaries Cyril, Constantine, and Methodius Method chose for the purpose of religious services. In the 12th century, the first hagiographies, or biographies of saints, were referred to as legends, which gradually led to the development of a historical genre called chronicles. During this time, an exceptional chronicle, the Bohemian Chronicle, was written in Latin by the Dean of the Prague chapter Cosmas. In the 13th century, the earliest preserved texts in the Czech language were written in the late 13th century at the courts of the primus-led kings of Bohemia. In this particular period, the number of works written in Czech began to rise. The 14th century brought a continuous stream of the Czech literary works, mostly consisting of hagiography, legends, epics, and chronicles, and adaptations of chivalrous romances, all in verse. The earliest secular work in the language was the epic Alexandrius, A Life of Alexander the Great, based on a Latin poem by the French writer Gautier de Chatillon. 14th century literature extended to most genres, from lyrical love poems to didactical works. Religious reforms begun by John Hus in the early 15th century set in motion the Hussite movement. which for 2 centuries pitted Czech reformers or Protestants against the Roman Catholic rulers of the Holy Roman Empire. The religious controversies and civil strife of this period fostered the use of Czech writing for practical and polemical purposes. Hus himself composed a strong sermons in Czech and wrote various treatises, of which the Ecclesia, or the Church, was the most important. Czech literature in the 16th century was predominantly didactic and scholarly, reflecting the humanism of the European Renaissance. What are the significant works during this period? The Moravian bishop John Blahoslav completed an early translation of the New Testament, and the lexicographer Daniel Adam of Vileslavin further enriched the vocabulary of humanist Czech. But the most significant landmark of the period was the Unitafras, whatever this word, scholars' translation of the Bible into Czech, known as the Kralis Bible. Also, Jan Amos Kolinski during this century was the preeminent one among the exiles who became known as the teacher of nations. He is an unquestionable authority in many respects. Of importance are primarily his pedagogical and didactical works such as the Latin language textbook Ianua Linguarum Brisata, or the Gate of Language as Unlocked, Orbis Sensua whatever, or the World in Pictures, and the Didactica Magna, or the Great Didactics. His verses, as well as the theoretical essays and major works of fiction such as his most widely known Labyrinth of the World and Paradise of the Heart, can be classified as artistic literature. Poetry and religious songs were rich, as documented by the numerous hymns that have survived since the 17th and 18th century. Literature was written in Latin or German, with the authors of the works being primarily educated Jesuits. Many of them, however, also attempted to preserve the Czech language and the national awareness. Czech had practically ceased to be used for higher literary purposes. Romantic movement was made to inaugurate a Czech national literary revival. Czech Romanticism drew impetus from the efforts of both scholars and literary artists, such as the Realism, which are these artists, Naturalism, Symbolism, Impressionism, and the decadence or anarchism of the major poets of that era. We must not omit Jan Neruda and the likes. The greatest poet of Czech Romanticism, and perhaps of all Czech poets, was Karel Hynek Mácha. His lyrics, prose fragments, and a lyrical epic may have been an influential one. The May group, named in honor of Mácha's great lyrical epic, was a school of writers in the second half of the 19th century who sought to create a Czech literature imbued with their own liberal and pragmatic nationalist aims. By the 1870s, Czech literature had fully established itself in the poetry and the novel, but not yet in drama. After 1918, with the establishment of an independent Czechoslovak state in 1918, Czech literature flourished. Czech's drama came into its own in the idealistic and satirical plays of Karel Čapek and František Langer. Čapek's best plays exposed the threats of centralized, mechanized society of the 20th century. RUR in 1920, that was the title of the novel, which introduced the word robot into English. In the period between 1918 and 1945, the lyric poetry of Jacob de Mille, Joseph Hora, František Kalas, Wiedersehen Zaval, and Horace Love Seifert exhibited greatly vitality and variety, with work of the highest quality being produced. After World War II, however, under communist control, Czech writing consequently underwent a marked decline. When strict political controls were relaxed in the early 1960s, the novels of Joseph Skobreker and Milan Kundera the short stories of Bohumil Hrabal and Arnos Lustig. The poetry of Miroslav Holub and the plays of Václav Havel began attracting international attention. In the wake of the Soviet-led invasion in 1968, many of these writers were suppressed in Czechoslovakia, though their reputations continued to grow abroad. Seifert, its chief surviving representative, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1984. After the Democratic Revolution of 1989, free literature flourished and the playwright Václav Havel, who had been a dissident, became president of Czechoslovakia and later of the Czech Republic. Well, if you're wondering where is the greatest author Franz Kafka, well, search for him in the Mariah Monster. Just kidding. Well, here he is.
The Trial, the Castle, America, in the Penal Colony, The Metamorphosis, The Judgment, Description of a Struggle, Letter to Father, and Meditation are just some notable works of Franz Kafka. However, this video will focus on one of his works, which is The Metamorphosis. But before we proceed on his work, let us know first the writer and his inspiration for making the said literary piece. Franz Kafka is a German language writer born on July 3, 1883 in Prague, Bohemia, Austria, Hungary, who died on June 3, 1924 in Pirling near Vienna. This German language writer of visionary fiction, whose work, especially the novel The Trial, written on 1925, and The Metamorphosis, that was written on 1915, which expressed the anxieties and alienation felt by many in the 20th century in Europe as well as in North America. Franz Kafka is the son of Julie Louis and Hermann Kafka, a merchant who are a prosperous middle-class Jewish family. Franz Kafka became the eldest child after his two brothers died in infancy. And to the rest of his life, Franz Kafka is conscious of his role as an elder brother. Otla, the youngest of his three sisters, became the family member closest to him. However, Kafka was not particularly close to his mother, subservient to her overwhelming ill-tempered husband and his exacting business. She shared with her spouse a lack of comprehension of their son's unprofitable, and they feared unhealthy dedication to the recording of his dreamlike inner life. The figure of Kafka's father overshadowed his work as well as his existence. The figure is in fact one of his most impressive creations. In his imagination, this coarse, practical, and domineering shopkeeper and patriarch who worshipped nothing but material success and social advancement belonged to a race of giants and was an awesome, admirable, but repulsive tyrant. In Kafka's most important attempt at autobiography, Letter to Father, that was written on 1916, the letter never reached to the addressee. Kafka attributed his failure to leave the cutlass from parental ties and establish himself in marriage and in fatherhood, as well as his escape into literature. To the prohibitive father figure which instilled in him the sense of his own impotence, he felt his will had been broken by his own father. Kafka's conflict with his father is directly reflected on his work. The Judgment, which was written on 1913, yet the roots of Kafka's despair and anxiety go deeper than his relationship with his father and his family, with whom he chose to live in close and proximity for the major part of his adult life. The source of Kafka's despair lies in a sense of ultimate isolation from true communion with all human beings. The friends he cherished, the woman he loved, the job he detested, the society he lived in, and with God, or as he put it, with an indestructible being. Sought out by
by the leading avant-garde publishers, Kafka reluctantly published a few of his writing during his lifetime. This publication includes two sections: the description of the struggle, written in 1936, and Meditation, which was written in 1913. These are a collection of short prose pieces. They also include other works representative of Kafka's maturity as an artist, which is The Judgment, which was written on 1912 and published a year later. Two other long stories, The Metamorphosis, was published in 1915, and in 1919 is in the Penal Colony. And a short collection of short prose, which are A Country Doctor in 1919 and The Hunger Artist, which was written on 1924. Misgiving of Kafka's work caused him to request that all his unpublished manuscripts get destroyed before his death. Brod, his closest friend and as his literary executor, disregarded his instruction and published the novels The Trial, The Castle, and America in 1925, 1926, and 1927, respectively, and a collection of shorter pieces, The Great Wall of China, in 1931.
Now let us know the characters of the story. The main characters include Gregor Samsa, Brett Samsa, Mr. Samsa, Mrs. Samsa, Charwoman, and the lodgers. Gregor is the protagonist. He is the guy who keeps his obligations. Brett is a sweet girl who once loved Gregor as a sibling, but she is changed by Gregor's transformation. Her, or Mr. Samsa, which is Gregor's father, is an emotionally broken business failure, while Mrs. Samsa, Gregor's mother, is a frail and stressed mother. In a sense, everyone's an antagonist. The characters consider Gregor so alien to anything, well, human, that they have a hard time establishing any sort of relationship with him. But Mr. Samsa seems to be the primary antagonist in Gregor's life. It is Mr. Samsa's position as the head of family that Gregor usurps when the family business collapses and Samsa is restored to his position of authority in the house after Gregor's transformation. The similarities between Brett and Gregor's name suggest that they are more than just siblings. They are doubles who must duke it out for the status of favored offspring. As Gregor's status in the family declines, Brett comes into her own as a self-sufficient, mature young woman, while Gregor failed in finding a spouse. The parents have high hopes for Brett's marriage and continuation of the family life. The characters of Gregor and Brett demonstrate varied and contradictory traits around character. These traits are manifest by Gregor as he transforms from being the vital and inspiring providers who nurtures the family to being the helpless and aspiring dependent. He is nurtured by the family and in the end, neglected by the family. Gregor's sister, Brett, is transformed from being the nurtured to the nurturer. She transformed from the aspect of an idealistic young girl to realistic young woman. The father and the mother do not demonstrate a variety of characters. They are basically flat characters. Gregor's father is one of the flat characters in the story. The novel depicts Mr. Samsa as an uncaring and callous individual whose primary interests revolve around financial opportunities. Mr. Samsa is depicted as being detached from his son Gregor. This aspect does not change throughout the story. The father, as Gregor refers to, has not been successful in his commercial endeavors. This lack of success causes the father to lose efficacy and to become discouraged. Mrs. Samsa demonstrates that she has a flat and changing aspect in the novel as well. The changes that Mrs. Samsa experiences are manifest in her assuming the role of contributing the well-being of the family by receiving employment and renting a room to new tenants.
The metamorphosis takes place in a small apartment where Gregor lives with his family. Though we are not given a specific time period,
Carriages and horses are included in the story, so it is safe to assume that the novella is set in a time before automobiles. Hello everyone! I am going to discuss the summary of Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. Samsa, a traveling salesman, wakes up in his bed to find himself transformed into a large insect. He looks around his room, which appears normal, and decides to go back to sleep to forget about what has happened. He attempts to roll over, only to discover that he cannot due to his new body. He is stuck on his hard, convex back. He tries to scratch an itch on his stomach, but when he touches himself with one of his many new legs, he is disgusted. He reflects on how dreary life as a travel salesman is and how he would quit if his parents and sister did not depend so much on his income. He turns to the clock and sees that he has overslept and missed his train to work. Gregor's mother knocks on the door, and when he answers her, Gregor finds that his voice has changed. His family suspects that he may be ill, so they ask him to open the door, which he keeps locked out of habit. He tries to get out of bed, but he cannot maneuver his transformed body. While struggling to move, he hears his office manager come into the family's apartment to find out why Gregor has not shown up to work. He eventually rocks himself to the floor and calls out that he will open the door momentarily. Through the door, the office manager warns Gregor of the consequences of missing work and hints that Gregor protests and tells the office manager that he will be there shortly. Neither his family nor the office manager can understand what Gregor says, and they suspect that something may be seriously wrong with him. Gregor manages to unlock and open the door with his mouth since he has no hands. He begs the office manager's forgiveness for his late start. Horrified by Gregor's appearance, the office manager bolts from the apartment. Gregor tries to catch up with the fleeing office manager, but his father drives him back into the bedroom with a cane and a rolled newspaper. Gregor injures himself squeezing back through the doorway, and his father slams the door shut. Gregor became exhausted and fell asleep. Gregor wakes up and sees that someone has put milk and bread in his room. Initially excited, he quickly discovers that he has no taste for milk, once one of his favorite foods. He settled himself under a couch and listened to the quiet apartment. The next morning, his sister Gret comes in. He sees that he has not touched the milk and replaces it with rotting food scraps, which Gregor happily eats. This begins a routine which his sister feeds him and cleans up while he hides under the couch, afraid that his appearance will frighten Gret. Gregor spends his time listening through the wall to his family members talking. They often discuss the difficult financial situation they find themselves in now that Gregor can provide for them. Gregor also learns that his mother wants to visit him, but his sister and father will not let her. Gregor grows more comfortable with his changed body. He begins climbing the walls and ceiling for amusement. Discovering Gregor's new pastime, Gret decides to remove some of the furniture to give Gregor more space. She and her mother begin taking furniture away, but Gregor finds their actions deeply distressing. He tries to save a picture on the wall of a woman wearing a fur hat, fur scarf, and a fur muff. Gregor's mother sees him hanging on the wall and passes out. Gret calls out to Gregor the first time anyone has spoken directly to him since his transformation. Gregor runs out of the room and into the kitchen. His father returns from his new job and, misunderstanding the situation, believes Gregor has tried to attack the mother. The father throws apples at Gregor, and one apple sinks into his back and remains lodged there. Gregor manages to get back into his bedroom, but he is severely injured. Gregor's family begins leaving the bedroom door open for a few hours each evening so he can watch them. He sees his family wearing down as a result of his transformation and their new poverty. Even Gret seems to resent Gregor now, feeding him and cleaning up with a minimum effort. The family replaces their maid with a cheap cleaning lady who tolerates Gregor's appearance and speaks to him occasionally. They also take on 3 boarders, requiring them to move excess furniture into Gregor's room, which distresses Gregor. Gregor has also lost his taste for the food Gret brings, and he almost entirely ceases eating. One evening, the cleaning lady leaves Gregor's door open while the boarders lounge about the living room. Gret has been asked to play the violin for them, and Gregor creeps out of his bedroom to listen. The boarders, who initially seem interested in Gret, grow bored with her performance, but Gregor is transfixed by it. One of the boarders spots Gregor and they become alarmed. Gregor's father tries to shove the boarders back into their rooms, but the 3 men protest and announce that they will move out immediately without paying rent because of the disgusting conditions in the apartment. Gret tells her parents that they must get rid of Gregor or they will all be ruined. Her father agrees, wishing Gregor could understand them and would leave of his own accord. Gregor does in fact understand and slowly moves back to the bedroom. There, determined to rid his family of his presence, Gregor dies. Upon discovering that Gregor is dead, the family feels a great sense of relief. The father kicks out the boarders and decides to fire the cleaning lady, who has disposed of Gregor's body. The family takes a trolley ride out to the countryside, during which they consider their finances. Months of spare living as a result of Gregor's condition have left them with substantial savings. They decide to move to a better apartment. Gret appears to have her strength and beauty back, which leads her parents to think about finding her husband. That was an elusive story. Now let us go to the analysis of the metamorphosis. The Metamorphoses is one of the most frequently analyzed works in literature, which chronicles the transformation of Gregor Samsa from a human being into an enormous insect. Is renowned for its ability to inspire diverse, sometimes mutually exclusive interpretations. For this reason, the Metamorphoses has come to be considered one of the central enigmas of the modern literary imagination. Nevertheless, critics generally praise Kafka's powerful and symbolic portrayal of alienation and achieved through the literalized metaphor of man as insect. The story is told in third-person limited view or perspective. This means the narrator is not a character in the story, but tells the events from a knowledgeable place. The narrator is able to dive deeply into one character's thoughts, feelings, and circumstances to better understand his perspective. Kafka chooses to maintain a singular focus on Gregor for most of the short novel, with brief switches to other characters' views. Kafka's persona in the tale is much like that of Gregor himself. He seems dispassionate and distant, incapable of dealing with modern world, and thus becomes relatable, as Gregor is a kind of blank slate to whom anyone with similar feelings may relate. Kafka even seems to take some cruel delight in Gregor's suffering. Tonally, he is very hard to pin down. There is, however, irony and even grim humor present throughout. Gregor thinks of his condition as an inconvenience and removes himself from the truth of his existence with phrases such as present condition, as though he merely had a broken arm. This is absurd extreme, understatement, and verbal irony. Though the story is about a man who suddenly transforms into an insect, the tone is not one of a horror or even wonder. Instead, it is supernatural and extreme dispassionate tone, where Gregor doesn't even seem to care. Isolation and alienation are major themes in the story. Gregor's physical transformation makes him a creature, stripping him of his humanity in the eyes of his family. Gregor's inability to communicate further isolates him. Gregor's family often defines him by his ability to work. Thematic analysis of the metamorphosis has tended to focus on the psychoanalytic and symbolic or allegorical nature of the story. While evaluations of the narrative vary, many commentators view the theme of alienation from humanity as the center of the story and interpret Gregor's transformation as kind of wish fulfillment or as an extended metaphor. Critics who perceive the metamorphosis as a form of wish fulfillment on Gregor's part find the text clues indicating that he deeply resented having to support his family. Desiring to be in turn nurtured by them, he becomes an insect. The complete dependence of Gregor's family and employer on him then is seen as an ironic foil to the reality of Gregor's anatomical transformation into a parasite. Many critics who approach the story in this way believe the primary emphasis of the metamorphosis is not upon Gregor but on his family, as they abandon their dependence on him and learn to be self-sufficient. One interpretation of the story holds that the title applies equally to Gregor's sister Gret. She passes to girlhood to young womanhood during the course of the narrative. Another view of Gregor's transformation is that it is an extended metaphor, carried from abstract to concept to concrete reality. Trapped in a meaningless job and isolated from the human beings around him, Gregor is thought of as an insect and by himself and by others, so he becomes one.
So after hearing the brief history of the country and its literary works, as well as the author who wrote the story entitled The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, we are now going to have our activity in line with our topic called 6 Thinking Hats. The mechanics. Number 1. There are 6 colors that represents each hat. Number 2. Now, the facilitator are going to choose 6 persons to represent the 6 hats. Number 3. The chosen people are going to ask someone a question regarding the topic of the color they represent.
Now let us proceed to our evaluation. Get a 1/2 sheet of paper and answer the following questions. Number 1 to 3. Name at least 3 notable works of Franz Kafka. I repeat, name at least 3 notable works of Franz Kafka. Number 4. Blank is the sweet girl who once loved Gregor as a sibling, but she is changed by Gregor's transformation. Blank is the sweet girl who once loved Gregor as a sibling, but she is changed by Gregor's transformation. Number 5. Who is the antagonist of the story? Who is the antagonist of the story? Number 6. Gregor's blank and blank are the flat characters in the story. Number 6. Gregor's blank and blank are the flat characters in the story. Number 7. It was during blank to blank when Czechoslovakia split into 2 separate nations.
Number 7, it was during blank to blank when Czechoslovakia split into two separate nations. Number 8, the novel entitled Blank introduced the word robot. The novel entitled Blank introduced the word robot. Number 9, Blank is the capital city of Czech Republic. Blank is the capital city of Czech Republic. Number 10, it was during blank century when the first text of Czech Republic was released. Number 10, it was during blank century when the first text of Czech Republic was released. Now for the enumeration, 11 to 15, state at least 5 characters in the story. 11 to 15, state at least 5 characters in the story. Okay, ballpens up and pass your paper to the center aisle. Thank you!
Di kayo